Hi, and welcome back to Tech Talk. I'm Executive Editor Ken Mingus from Computer World. I'm here with Brandon Butler from Network World, Michael Simon from Mac World and PC World. From an undisclosed location, Famina Rashid from CSO. We're going to talk about everything from data breaches to the new Apple Watch to the fact that artificial intelligence is everywhere, or will be soon. Stick around. Okay, so maybe we should call this Data Breach September because given Equifax and everything that's been going on, including the CEO being allowed to retire.
Yeah, that's put that in
retire
air quotes.
in air quotes. And Brandon, this was something you wanted to talk about. So, I have sort of vaguely followed Equifax. I did look to see if if my data was breached, and apparently I and everybody else's data was breached.
Yeah.
So what's going on?
Well, let me give a quick recap of everything that's happened over the last couple months as it relates to Equifax. So apparently sometime between May and July, hackers gained access to some Equifax data. Obviously, Equifax is one of the big three credit reporting bureaus. So people use Equifax to check their credit, and companies use Equifax to check consumers' credit to see if you can get a loan or something like that. So they have a whole trove of customer data out there. So sometime between May and July, hackers gained access to this Equifax data. On July 29th, Equifax says that they were able to stop this intrusion into their systems, but it did not come out until September 7th that Equifax
how that always
actually
seems to be
announced
the case.
that their systems had been penetrated. So they got some criticism for that, for waiting so long. I think they were trying to get their ducks in a row to sort of figure out what their response was going to be before they announced it.
Didn't they also sell some stock beforehand?
Yes, there were
ducks in a row.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the new selling stock,
Yes.
ducks in a row.
Yes, and so since then, after they announced the hack, their website was flooded with people checking whether to see if they were impacted by this. Up to 143 million Americans were impacted by this.
Me too.
But there's some interesting things with if someone ran a test with the name of test and the social security number 1234567.
I saw that.
And that
Bing,
was then
you've been breached.
Right. So
I actually tried that myself, and I got back. It looks like you have been breached.
So that raises some questions about, is the system in place that's checking to see if you were hacked? Can you trust that?
Well, can you trust the people who lost your data to be aware of this and clean it up after the fact?
Right. Yeah. So it's
outrage.
And so, as you mentioned, there were some stock sales from some executives there in the month of July. Equifax,
after they knew about the breach, but before it had been made public.
Yes.
Because as soon as it was made public, the stock tanked.
Yes. And Equifax says that these executives were not aware of the breach. So
purely coincidental.
Well, now, so am I supposed to feel better that the executives didn't know about the breach when they sold the stock? It's like, okay.
And we have seen some heads roll figuratively throughout this process. Their CIO, CISO, and CEO have all retired.
Yeah.
The CEO is going to be appearing before Congress next week, so we might get some more information then. But this is not a good situation. And I think it really just points to the fact of another breach here. This isn't the first time we've seen these things happen.
And it won't be the last.
And it won't be the last. No. And I know, Famita, you were going to talk about some other stuff that's happened just this month as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that struck me about Equifax specifically was generally when we have a breach, we talk about, oh my goodness, what did you do wrong? Why did this breach even happen? With Equifax, I feel like we've been saying, how did you handle it after you found it? And that's where most of our conversation had been. And in a way, I'm kind of happy about this. Because I think every time we have a data breach, we talk about, oh, they did this wrong, that's why the breach happened. So we get bogged down on that. I mean, I was kind of joking. I'm calling September bad September. I want to do over. I want to get rid of it. Equifax and then SEC, somebody stolen, they might have done insider trading based on all the economic data of public corporations. Deloitte, okay, somebody managed to take over the admin credentials and get access to internal email system, which is going to have lots of sensitive information about clients that's not public. So again, we're talking insider trading. It just suddenly got to the point where I'm trying to say it doesn't it matters why the breach happened. We need to fix that. But
Sure.
I think the conversation now really needs to move to how are we responding? How are we changing? How are we fixing? I mean, we're at the point where saying, oh, you didn't patch, you didn't, change your password is no longer enough. I mean, September is not even over. There's 3 more days left, and I'm actually
Oh God,
terrified.
don't say that.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think about what are the big lessons from not just this situation, but other situations that we've seen over the years. And I think, to me, the big thing is that consumers need to really take their own data security into their own hands. And you really can't trust any organization, I feel like, to hold your data and hold it securely. You wish that you could, but I think you just have to really make sure that that you're putting the protections that you feel you need to in place, and you don't just rely on someone else to do that for you.
And the key thing here is, I think, the realization finally that it's not even data we give away. Like we've been hearing in security circles a lot that we're no longer the consumer, we're the product. And I think Equifax and some of these other things have really highlighted the fact that you don't actually have to give a company your data for you to be at risk. They are collecting and getting all your information from other sources, but you still need to somehow be able to stay on top of it, get some kind of control over what you do have control.
Well, that's what I was going to say to that end. I mean, what could we do? I mean, this is, Equifax is collecting this data. I didn't give Equifax any data.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing that I've heard specifically related to this Equifax is you can put a credit freeze on your account so that if anyone tries to check your credit and apply for a credit card or a loan in your name, that these companies have to unfreeze your account before they give out your credit score. So that's sort of a day one thing that regular consumers can do.
But let's just point out that costs $10 or $20 a month to do that,
and
which is absurd.
And I have to wonder what happens if 143 million people put their credit on, freeze it. I mean, I have to think there would be some spillover effects there,
right?
Aside from securing your information,
right? And you need to unfreeze it if you actually do want to apply for.
I froze my credit last December. I had a breach or an ID, whatever an identity attack where someone called up AT&T, somehow had my social security number and my apartment number, which I had just moved into, so I'm assuming it was related to the building I was living in, but I don't know for sure. And they got a bunch of iPhones, a bunch of phone numbers. I got a bill for like $500 or $800. Called up AT&T, thankfully was able to figure it out. Called up all of the other telecom people. They tried Sprint, they tried Verizon, but I already had an account, so that didn't work.
Okay.
And actually Sprint actually stopped it, and because they thought something was fishy there. So I called up TransUnion, or I didn't call them. I logged on to TransUnion. I paid the $20. I locked down my credit. I bought a house this past March, I got a new lease on a car. So I had to unfreeze my credit. Equifax is telling me within that 3 months, someone I was part of that breach.
So it was just that window when you were doing the
I
house
took all the precautions I needed to take.
Yeah.
Like, what are you supposed to do? In this instance, I feel that you're just at the mercy of someone who has your information, and so there's nothing you can do.
It comes down to checking your own credit report.
And I do religiously.
Right. You do that, and you check your credit card statements and make sure that there's no nefarious activity there.
But once you find something, it could be too late.
Yes.
It does always feel like we're perpetually closing the door after the horse has run out the barn.
Totally.
It doesn't feel like there's anything preemptively that we can do. I mean, yes, okay, you can freeze your credit, but...
Well, and I think there might be a role for some additional regulatory bodies here to make sure that these companies are taking the proper security procedures in their own place. Obviously, this is a delicate area in terms of how much you do want to regulate that. But yeah, there were some stories about to be able to unlock your credit freeze. Experian, which is one of the other big three credit bureaus, apparently you're able to do that with a social security number and your name, date of birth. Like there should be some additional security measures in place there, like a two-factor authentication to unlock your credit freeze. So I think there could be some potential regulatory actions coming from this.
There's no kind of universal rules because TransUnion, it was two-factor. It was my social security number, and then they also either sent me a text or called me and asked me whatever security questions I had set up to make sure it was me. But yeah, it's not a universal thing. And why are private companies in charge of this stuff anyway? They should be a government-run agency, and we shouldn't have to pay to lock down our credit report.
Well, it also seems like if there were hard and fast penalties for companies that allow this to happen, I mean,
not just the CEO retiring,
not just a
with a golden parachute. That's not good enough.
Not just a golden parachute retirement, but seriously, and not monetary damages. But if a former CIO or CISO went to jail, I think you might see more attention on security.
Yeah, maybe.
Especially when it's a company like Equifax. I mean, that really does have sensitive financial information on so many people.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not just a small breach. This is literally half the country.
One thing this will do is shine a light on, I don't think most people even understand that these are private companies, and these are companies that we have no control over. When you buy a house, they're running your credit card, your credit report through agencies.
Right.
Your entire credit history, your social security number, everything about you. If someone gets that, that is your entire life.
Yeah. And while freezing your credit and checking your credit reports and checking your credit cards, it might not prevent all breaches. It could help protect a lot of people, and that's better than what we have now in a lot of circumstances.
I mean, I think the other thing worth thinking about, some companies do actually make it a little easier to look at your credit report. I know like Discover always tells you what your credit score is. I mean, for a lot of people, that's an easy way of even telling. If your score is suddenly blipping up and down, then you can say, hey, wait a minute, someone is doing something with my account because I know I haven't. It gives you a clue. All right, I need to start calling around. I need to be checking my credit card a little bit more closely. Has someone been doing something with my activity? So there are tools out there. I think it just kind of becomes a burden on the individual consumer. Like, okay, this is what I need to do.
Yeah.
But I think Brandon's point is very important that as consumers, as individuals, we need to be putting pressure on Congress, our state lawmakers, like, hey, you can't just do hearings and then not do anything about it. We've been talking about data breach notification law for, 4 years now?
At least.
We still don't have any action on it. So it's kind of like we need to, as voters, to start really making calls, making like demands that we want some kind of regulation, some kind of penalty, going to jail, something, because this is a crime. It's no longer a business mistake. It's an actual crime.
Right. One of the things that I do is try to keep an eye on my credit using Credit Karma, which is a free service which allows you to sort of see what your scores are, and you can kind of track whether there's some anomalies that might show up. But I mean, after the Equifax breach, my mom, who's 80, called and said, what should I do? And I'm like, well, you can check, but everybody's being told that they've been breached. I don't know that there's anything at the moment you can do, Mom, but she's not going to be able to continually check her credit or look for things in her bank account that might seem squirrely, or she might look for them, but she might not see them. And so it does go back to that need for oversight and some sort of hard and fast system, whether it's a government agency or whether it's penalties for companies that suffer these breaches, but just sort of sitting back and saying, well, they'll get a black eye and the market will take care of it and everybody's on their own, isn't going to work. We're too interconnected now.
Yeah. Well, I think if there's ever a time for something like that to happen, it seems like this Equifax story has caught a lot of people's attention, and there could be sort of a time to implement some of these changes.
Yeah. Okay, good. Good discussion, everybody, on that one. Let me jump into something sort of definitely different. It's not about data breaches, but this goes to a column that Mike Elgan wrote for Computer World this week, talking about artificial intelligence and the way he talked about how it is rolling out. I mean, it's embedded in devices. It's embedded in the new iPhone X or 10, the new iPhone 8. But he was talking about AI as the new electricity, which I really like the way he sort of made this point. And that is, when you think about technologies that really radically change what's going on in the world around us, the arrival of electricity in the 1880s, 1870s, 80s, 90s changed how we did everything in terms of, and spawned generations of new industries that would not have been there, including all of the stuff around us right now without electricity. And so Mike's point is that artificial intelligence, it's embedded in different apps now. It's going to help us make decisions. It's going to make decisions for us in terms of, when we get an Uber Lyft, or how long it's going to take us to get home, or the best route to take to get home, or things like that, there are going to be so many building blocks that go on top of AI over the next 5, 10, 20 years that it's going to change how we live. And I thought that was a fascinating prospect. And I was just curious as to whether you think that's on the mark, or I mean, he also had this idea that it was going to make the world a great place, and we'll all be living together and happy
until they take over and
well,
kill us all.
And then if AI gets mad at us and drives us off the road, I do, there are some dystopian futures there too. But I'm just curious, do you think that AI actually does have the possibility of being the next electricity in terms of changing how we do things, or do you think it's just another of a lot of cool technologies that are emerging at this time?
I mean,
I'm open to suggestions. I'm just curious.
I mean, I don't know about electricity, maybe Wi-Fi.
Okay.
Wi-Fi, when we were able to disconnect our computer from wires, and
it's the most amazing moment of my life.
Yeah,
my
seriously.
First airport.
And I remember Steve Jobs with the iBook, and how it was the first, consumer, or the first major consumer cheap portable that had Wi-Fi built in, and it was a big deal.
Yeah.
That changed. You look at cloud computing, all this stuff that kind of birthed all these things, and yeah, AI, neural networks, machine learning. I mean, absolutely. It's not just, hey, Siri, what's the weather?
No.
I mean, there's a lot more to it, even though that's kind of what people think about when they think about AI.
He makes the point that, a typical airline pilot, when he's, flying from point A to point B, is actually in control of the plane about 7 minutes during an average flight. The rest of it's autopilot. But autopilot is AI. It's flying the plane. Yeah. It's making human decisions about where that plane should go and how it should go there. And so it's uses like that we don't really think of that are already out there,
Yeah, I mean, if you ask me, is AI going to be ubiquitous in the future, then yeah, I would say that's definitely going to be the case. I mean, all indications are pointing that way. We're not there yet. And there's obviously a lot of hurdles that need to overcome to get there. I think the metaphor to electricity, I think, is an interesting one too, because I feel like electricity you think of almost as a utility, and everything runs on electricity, and you need electricity to work. AI seems like the type of thing that's going to improve what we do, and it's going to make things easier for us to do, but it's not going to be like everything is necessarily going to rely on AI to actually work fundamentally.
Okay.
I agree. I think it's more of it will be a ubiquitous feature as opposed to an essential feature. I mean, I think there'll still be things that can work just as fine, maybe not as fine, but it was functional without AI. But the AI would be sort of the layer that makes things a little bit easier, a little bit more efficient, a little bit more secure. So it'll be more of an enhancement as opposed to critical.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that about security, because I was just looking at his column, and one of the points he makes is that banks use AI for fraud detection, mobile deposits, credit checking, and other tasks. So maybe if there'd been a little more AI at Equifax or some of these other companies.
And that seems like a great use case. I mean, I would love to have a computer sort of running through and making these checks that it would take a lot of man hours to do. It's a much more efficient way to do it. I think the interesting question about AI is what's holding back the industry right now? Like, what are the roadblocks to get to this world of ubiquity in AI? And I think that the biggest problem in my mind right now is the developer gap in the knowledge base of what it takes to implement AI in these applications. And I feel like we're just at the very earliest stages, that there's not enough developers and knowledge base out there to actually implement this technology in the applications. And that's going to change. It just takes time to develop this knowledge base. And there's a lot of companies out there, cloud providers like Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. They're enabling their cloud platforms to give developers the opportunity to implement some of these basic
we've talked
features.
In the past about the smart networks. The thing.
Yeah, certainly intent-based networking is.
Bingo.
Yeah, you're seeing AI sort of creep into all these different angles of consumer and enterprise technology, and that's certainly only going to continue. But people need to sort of learn how to use this and learn how to implement it into their applications, and that's a big learning curve. And companies are going to make it easier to develop AI and implement AI into their applications, but it's still going to be a learning curve.
And I think
there's also a technology gap. I mean, I'm not sure we are even at a point where all our systems are capable. I mean, like machine learning, there were so many things we knew academically could be done, but it's only now that the algorithms are actually possible because the computing has caught up, and AI is even more intensive, a little bit more advanced. So it kind of feels like we have a lot of great theories, we have a lot of great ideas of how this could work. We just don't actually have the technology or, as Brandon said, knowledge to get there yet.
And the technology to scale. I mean, it's one thing to have the technology in a big box in a room in a company somewhere, but you need it, everywhere, which means IoT sensors and phones and networks and whatever.
And I think that's where the cloud could play a role in terms of not having
linking
this,
everything.
Yeah, and sort of having a back end cloud that's doing a lot of this artificial intelligence, sort of not at the edge and at the device, but sort of in the cloud, and then it sends that intelligence that it's found to the devices type thing.
And I think we need some sense of universality. There's Google Assistant, there's Apple Siri, there's Alexa, I'm talking about on a consumer level. And they don't all work together. Some devices work with Apple, some devices work with Amazon stuff.
Like we need a common language, is what you're saying.
Like I'm setting up all these smart devices in my home. So I have a doorbell, I have lights, I have the Nest thermostat. The Nest doesn't work with HomeKit. The lights, work with Alexa. I can say, Alexa, turn off my lights. Google says it a different way. Sometimes they're not recognized with each other. Like there needs to be some kind of a foundation where all of these companies can work together towards a common goal.
And I think that points to the nascent nature of this market right now, and that there are not de facto standards that have emerged yet. But I think you will tend to see that as the technology evolves.
It's also expensive. These devices, when you talk about just like setting up a smart home, we're talking thousands of dollars. Yeah. And in 3 years, they might be obsolete.
Well, thousands of dollars, and different systems and different ways of accessing those systems. And, that the ubiquity part is going to be a long ways away, I think, until one company somehow maybe does it right and sets the standard, and then everybody has to follow. But I agree that's going to be a while. Okay, so AI, important technology. Ubiquitous at some point down the road, but probably not the next electricity. Sounds like the summary of
that's
where we see it. Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I think phones are going to really kind of power this forward. We see it on the iPhone 10, the iPhone X, whatever you want to call it. That Face ID, that's constantly using its neural network. It's built into the chip. There's the A11 chip that Apple built, which I don't think they get nearly enough credit for.
Right.
That chip is something else. It is as fast as a MacBook.
What's it, the neural engine they call it?
Yeah, the neural engine. It's the A11. It's just it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's faster than like last year's MacBook.
It's interesting because I just edited a column that hasn't gone live yet about Face ID and how it will be used for authentication and logging you in, and down the road how, rather than looking at your phone and being, allowed in your phone is unlocked and you can get into your data and stuff, that, you'll go to work and you'll sit in front of your computer and something like Face ID will log you into your computer.
Microsoft has that Hello system already.
Hello.
Yeah. It's not quite ubiquitous, but it's the start of it.
Right. And well, as is this, or door locks to your company.
Or a car.
Or a car, any of that. And the thing, what was interesting though, was the point he was making is that when your face becomes your key, you stop thinking about authentication and logging in or whatever. You just go and you're allowed where you're allowed, either into your computer, into your car, into the building, whatever. And the Face ID is just the start of that, I think. There are going to be so many people buying iPhones in about a month.
And you're not going to get it for 3 months.
No, I said buying. I don't expect to have it until 2018, but that's a huge base that will suddenly be exposed to Face ID and this whole technology.
What about the evil twin, though?
What? Well, I don't have an evil twin that I know of, so I think I'm okay. And if you're asleep, you have to look at the phone. You can't do it. Somebody can't hold it up to your sleeping face.
It does need your retinas as well, so I'm not sure an evil twin would work. If I meet some, I'll try it. But
do we know if evil twins' retinas are the same?
I don't know.
Do evil twins have the same fingerprints?
No,
I don't think so.
They don't.
So I would like to think that a retina scan.
You would think that it's different.
Okay. Well, we'll have to come back to that one, because I really do want to come back to that.
To speak to that point, that neural chip, that neural network is constantly evaluating. Okay, now today you have glasses on. Tomorrow you have a little more stubble on your face, and you lost some weight. Like, it's constantly reevaluating and learning the contours of your face to get smarter and smarter, and only unlock that phone or do whatever it has to do.
Technology.
Does that sound really cool or scary? I really do get a cool, scary vibe at the same time from that. It's like both. That's some really valuable data that someone might someday be able to breach.
Apple locks it to your phone, but on Android phones, it certainly won't be.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a slippery slope there. We'll see.
Okay. Well, we drifted into Face ID, but I did want to talk about the new Apple Watch Series
without
3.
Face ID, but
without Face
Series 4.
That's coming.
Yeah,
that you look at the watch and it'll log you in.
The next feature will have a camera for FaceTime and for Face ID. Definitely.
Well, it's interesting because the reason we want to talk about this is because the Apple Watch Series 3 arrived last week. There were a lot of reviews that came out right before the watch arrived on people's wrists, talking about how the LTE system didn't really work, that people were trying to make phone calls and battery life was like, horrific. And so, Michael, you've got the new Apple Watch Series 3.
I see the red dot.
Yeah.
He's got the red dot.
I kind of like the red dot. A lot of people are
I like
hating
the red
on it.
dot. Well, you got to let somebody know you got the
Yeah.
latest and greatest, right? So, I mean, how is it working? That's what I want to tell me why I should buy a new watch.
All right. So you're right.
Not
When-
should I?
No,
Why?
why I should? I just need the rationale, but I haven't bought it yet.
The first
Yeah.
the first round of reviews about it wasn't all of them. It wasn't even really half of them. It was just the ones that got the most attention. But some people did have issues with connecting to the LTE network while they were roaming, and it turned out Apple issued a statement, and it has to do with the way the watch doesn't have a Wi-Fi screen. Like, you can't go on and choose your network and type in your password. That's all done through your phone. So what happens was it kind of looks for Wi-Fi networks that you've been
That you've
connected to
accessed
in the past.
Yeah.
And at times, if that connects to a public Wi-Fi high spot or a hotel or a school
At an
or,
airport or wherever.
or mall, whatever, wherever you are, sometimes those things bring up those kind of interstitial screens that you have to type in your password or even just say okay.
Yeah.
You can't do that on a watch, so that was hanging it up where it would get stuck on a Wi-Fi network. I did experience that early on when roaming around my town. A couple times I would look and there would be an X on it and it would say disconnected. I would have to toggle off the LTE switch and then toggle it back on, which is a real pain. I mean, you're not supposed to have to do that. So I went home, I reset my iPhone network settings, which clears everything out, which is also a pain. So I had to retype the ones that I need in my home and work and all that stuff. And I went into my Mac and I went into my list of Wi-Fi networks, which saves all of them. And I kind of systematically deleted ones that I knew were, an overnight hotel stay or whatever I needed. And that seems to have helped. I haven't had those issues since then. Now, listen, customers shouldn't have to do
They're
that
not
when
gonna
you
do
buy
that.
a $400 watch.
If you have to do that, then the
That's something
system
wrong.
that Apple has designed is. But that also sounds like something that could be a fairly simple software
and
update.
Apple said that they will. I'm actually surprised it hasn't come out already, but I guess within days or weeks or whatever it is. But they did admit the problem, and they did say that a fix is coming.
Yeah.
What confuses me about these things, I mean, Apple is the biggest company in the world. They test these things for months. Nobody noticed this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This
that's
didn't happen to
surprising.
anybody else
It
but the
does
reviewers.
make you
That's
wonder
crazy.
why. Yeah, I mean, I was actually surprised because usually Apple's very good at rolling out new products like this, and there's a certain cadence to what they do. They announce the product, and then there's delayed ordering, and then it ships later on, and right before it ships, some of the big league players like Wall Street Journal and some of the other tech pubs get early reviews in, and the early reviews on this were mixed at best, and some of them were rather harsh, including the Wall Street Journal saying this is a cool watch, but it doesn't work.
Joanna Stern said, "Don't buy it."
Yeah,
I mean that's harsh.
yeah, that's really harsh and sort of a surprise. And as you say, how could Apple not have seen this?
And I, to her credit, and I agree. If it doesn't work, don't buy it because this is the only reason to buy this watch. That's the marquee, the only real new feature about it is
the LTE.
Yeah.
So you're telling me if I get a new watch, I have to get the LTE?
I mean, it's what is it, $80 more?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not. I mean, that's significant, but it's not like the iPad was $130. It's not.
I would think
it's not
for
a
future
$600
resale
device.
value, it would make sense just to have it to make it more valuable.
And I
for
think that
resale.
Apple will improve the reception and
What
definitely
about
will
the
fix that bug.
battery life?
All right, so battery life when I'm using it sporadically with my phone, and occasionally I run out and do a quick errand. It's amazing. I can get 2 days.
Which for the
just
Apple
about
Watch
2
is
days.
it more than double what they used to get? So that is a lot.
Yeah, on my Series 0, I got, maybe I made it to the end of the day if I was lucky.
Yeah.
Series 2 got about 18 to 20 hours. This is, roughly in that ballpark.
Okay.
But impressive, where I can use it all day long, probably 85% connected to my phone, so it's not running as hard. With LTE, it's a different ballgame. For example, my phone I left in my car. So I've been running it since about 9 o'clock this morning, and I'm probably down to 63%.
Okay.
And
So
it's
what's
early
that?
afternoon now. Yeah.
Yeah, so I can probably get 7 hours, but
You haven't made any calls,
I
have you?
did.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I know I've been pushing it. I
Okay.
made calls. I sent messages. I used Hey
Specifically-
Siri. I played some music.
Okay.
I've been doing a lot with it, more than I probably normally would.
Mhm.
And this isn't a use case.
Yeah.
you're not going to purposely leave your phone at home. It's for
Those
running
accidents,
yeah.
or if you just want to run out for a minute and come back and not have to take
or
the phone
or
with you.
just not have your phone at all. At which point you won't be making phone calls and you won't even really be paying attention to. Like if I want to go out to eat with my family,
Yeah.
and I want to leave my phone at home, but I want, just in case something horrible happens and my parents need to get in touch with me or someone needs to get in touch with me, I have the peace of mind that someone can reach me.
Yeah.
But I just, like, I'm not gonna bother with it.
Okay.
And for that instance, so let's say out of a 12-hour day, you'll be connected to LTE for 2 hours. You'll easily get through it.
Okay.
Is that worth $10 a month? I don't know.
That's right. There is an extra
Yeah.
cost.
There,
Okay.
no
That's
matter what carrier
It's all the
you're
carriers.
going to pay $10. There's a 3-month kind of trial period, which I thought was interesting. Apple generally doesn't do that, but clearly it's coming from them because they, all of the carriers, T-Mobile, AT&T, Sprint, and Verizon all have the same 3-month kind of like gratis period. But listen, I think it's a cool device.
And what do you see as the end game for the Apple Watch? Because do you see it replacing the phone, or it's always going to be augmenting the
Always,
phone,
yeah.
right? Yeah, because it's not a content consumption.
really is an
device. I mean,
accessory.
yeah.
Yeah.
You're not going to be reading, I mean, news articles.
Oh
on
God,
it.
no! Not on that little screen.
Yeah, I can't imagine it's ever going to replace the phone. It's an amazing little device. I think that there's a lot more it can do. Like, for example, I was talking about my smart home. So I have a Ring doorbell. I get a notification that someone's at my door. I can't look at it, which is something that I would like to see. We were talking about Face ID, a camera, a little camera maybe for FaceTime video calls, which would just harpoon the battery. But we'll talk about, they can figure that problem out.
Eventually.
Yeah. And also for Face ID, just authentication.
Well, and also geolocation. You've got it with you, and I could see how that might be useful in search and rescue, cases like that.
There is an SOS thing.
Right.
You can send out like a beacon.
Right.
There's no Notes app. Like Apple Notes isn't on the phone, which seems bizarre. Like I would use that all the time to, like when I have an idea, I can just say, "Hey Siri, write this down."
Yeah.
But it's just not like there's a lot of things that just aren't there yet. But I think in 3 to 4 years, this is going to be a
Thank you, Siri.
I think in 3 to 4 years, it's going to be like the iPod was. Maybe people are going to have one. People are going to want to have one. They're not going to sell 75 million in a quarter. But I think as a next generation wearable, Apple is just way at the front of the pack.
Yeah, they certainly seem to be. Okay, so to sum up, we've decided that data breaches are bad and that companies are not being punished enough. All of our data is out there floating around, and we really can't do a lot at the moment to take care of it. Artificial intelligence, useful, ubiquitous eventually, probably not the next electricity, but still something that's going to, affect how we do what we do all the time. And Apple Watch Series 3, which Michael says is a must-have.
I don't know about let's not put those words in my mouth.
All right.
For me,
a valuable accessory.
I wouldn't give it up.
I think so. At some point. Okay, great. Famita, any last thoughts before we sign off?
Well, I was going to say, I've always been against the entire idea of a wearable, but just listening to this, I'm kind of sitting here thinking, I think I want something on my wrist now.
All of the cool kids have them,
Yeah, and I just have a regular analog watch, so maybe time to join the digital revolution
There
here.
you go. Yeah, I hear there's a lot in that digital stuff. Okay, Famita, thanks so much for stopping by. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Brandon.
Thank you.
For now, you know what we know.